Thank you very much. I think it would be simpler to say I'm a Chinese metaphysicist, actually. I like that idea. My apologies if I'm not the first to say this, because I missed quite a lot of yesterday. But it seems to me we've built to this Spanish-located pinnacle that is this conference organised by EAVI. It all started earlier this month here in Madrid with the 31st International Conference of Data Protection and Privacy, a very focused and important area that should be part of our considerations. Then just this week in Barcelona, there has been a meeting on regulation in a convergent environment, discussing the challenges both for government, regulators and policymakers, but also recognising, I hope and understand, I wasn't there, the challenges for industry. So that moved the focus out to look at delivery of content and issues of rights for the consumers, including internet access rights, which I know is a controversial issue both here in Spain and indeed in the UK. But now we are here in Madrid at this meeting to talk about the recipient, if you like, of all the opportunities offered by these discussions, the citizen. But, importantly, and recognised absolutely by all those policymakers and by industry, also the consumer, the user, and very importantly, the wealth generator. But may I first thank the organisers of this meeting for the opportunity to be here. It's a great honour to be addressing this group of experts in their field, even if it is what we call the graveyard slot, and after very nice wine and very nice food, but it's a delight to be here, and in these surroundings and in this beautiful city, so thank you. And thank you also to those who are still here at the end of a two-day meeting which has raised many issues and given us all substantial food for thought. My task is to set out what I see are the policy challenges that remain as we move towards the Spanish presidency, and to provide an overview of the issues that those far more expert than I am, who are here on this panel, will develop. And I'd like to take up this task by starting with the Audiovisual Services Media Directive to be implemented across the European Union on the 19th of December. I make no apologies. I know you have seen this article a number of times. And while I agree with Mr. Perellis from this morning on the limitations of the directive, it is important because it is inclusive and it brings into law the requirement to pay more than lip service to a consideration of media literacy. So we start with a recognition that media literacy sits with the other areas that were discussed in earlier conferences this month in Spain. The way in which technologies allow changes in user behaviour and opportunities in both a socio-cultural and economic arena, the requirement for economic growth to have a thriving industry, and a recognition, the pinnacle that is this meeting, I argue, that media literacy is a vital element for the success of both of the above. I'm not going to try and define the term media literacy. It seems to me that all articles and discussions begin with trying to find a definition, and this is a source of some amusement and mockery, dare I admit, for those who do not work in the field. But it is important to recognise why that is. This attempt to struggle towards a common definition is symptomatic of where we find ourselves, especially now, in this increasingly digital, always-on environment. It is totally dynamic, and it is right that the precise elements of the definition change with the environment created by shifting technologies and the developing uses found for these technologies, many of which are not predicted or predictable. And the study recently submitted to the EU and coordinated by EAVI, the study of the assessment criteria of media literacy levels in Europe, tried to do exactly that, look at those elements. So going back to the main thrust of what I want to say, the importance of media literacy is underlined by the recognition that the new economies will be dominated by digital technologies and the human ability to use these technologies for social, cultural and economic advantage. In 2000, Europe recognised in the Lisbon Agenda that if it was to compete internationally, it had to accept, promote and be part of the knowledge economy. And this required the development of different competencies among the population, with skills to be changed from those involved, for example, in manufacturing, to those involved with ICT and other technologies. The Digital Britain report, published earlier this year, emphasises this thinking, saying that on current definitions, the Digital Britain sectors account for nearly 1 in every £10 that the whole economy produces each year. The report, I've been told to slow down, so sorry. The report goes on to note trends in other countries and refers to the stimulus packages being offered to industry by national governments to push the development of next-generation networks and high-speed broadband and smart grid technology. Some of these initiatives have been arrested in some European countries or scaled down because of the economic crisis. But they are not stopped altogether, and they remain among the aspirations of those in charge. So the new forms of technology that deliver digital content, be it entertainment or for commerce or for socio-cultural reasons, are crucial to the way in which our societies are expected to develop. The work being undertaken to develop a post-I-2010 agenda also underlines this, with digital inclusion, the need to get more or less everyone connected to the internet and the opportunities it offers seen as vital. The EU Telecoms Reform Package, finally approved on Tuesday, also highlights the importance of connectivity in the eyes of policymakers, both nationally and at the EU level. And this was amplified recently in the Commission's recommendation on media literacy for a more competitive audiovisual and content industry and an inclusive knowledge society, which stated, a higher degree of media literacy would significantly help to approaching the objectives set, in particular regarding a more competitive knowledge economy, while contributing to a more inclusive society. There is lots going on in that set of words: competitive, economy, inclusive society. And importantly, the recommendation is recognising the importance of media literacy in content creation. Alongside this, there needs to be an understanding by consumers and citizens of the way in which the technologies can be harnessed and the content used for the safe and efficient functioning of these same societies. Very often, when media literacy is discussed, it comes from what some authors from New Zealand call a deficit viewpoint, the need for protection. That is, protection from unsuitable or inappropriate material, particularly protection of the young. And the digital media delivery platforms, with their ability to make content more easily accessible than in an analogue linear world, increase that fear, particularly for us old people, Naomi. Most of us in this room have grown up with analogue television. We understand its conventions of timing. There are other conventions too, which vary more with the age of the audience and familiarity with the genre. Children of quite a young age are able to distinguish between fact and fiction. Audiences seem to understand well that a documentary will go into greater detail about, say, an item that has been in the news than the news item might. That, combined with the possibility of combined with the scheduling of the documentary programme, ensures that the audience knows it should expect material that may be more challenging or upsetting than the news item might have been. So alongside these concerns about access to inappropriate material by young people or the desire for economic strength comes continuing uncertainty about the role of regulation. The scarcity of spectrum, which defines analogue transmissions, means that such regulation has been both necessary to allow proper access to a public commodity, permitted through licence or otherwise, and possible. It has been relatively simple to regulate or monitor finite amounts of content delivered on a few or even many channels, but this is all changing, and the numbers of stakeholders are greater and the issues more complex. In the UK, for example, you can watch a television programme on a broadcast or cable or satellite delivered service, and it will be subject to quite a lot of regulation. Watch that same programme via the internet, and it will be more likely regulated than broadcast from the 19th of December if the programme service on which it is to be seen falls within the criteria defined by the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. Watch the same programme on YouTube or from somewhere outside Europe, and it will be entirely unregulated. although self-regulation is apparent on many of the user-generated sites, with people voting off certain clips or programs if they are thought distasteful. So this slide shows the many, and perhaps not all, different groups that the regulatory framework must address. It is largely agreed by policymakers and stakeholders that creating a more communications or media literate population will offer a balance between draconian statutory regulation that will be circumvented and no regulation, which runs too many risks of creating bad press for politicians and policymakers. Where statutory regulation is not possible, many countries are looking to developing self- and or co-regulatory systems to regulate the industry. In the UK, self-regulation has proved especially successful in the newest of the markets, with the industry developing codes of practice for social networking sites and mobile content. However, these codes alone are not sufficient to ensure safe and appropriate use or reception of media content. So we need to create a population where users and audiences take more responsibility with more knowledge for controlling what they and their families watch, what Professor Carlson called being able to maximise opportunities and minimise risks. And alongside increasing the competencies of the individual to take this greater responsibility, other environmental factors also need to operate well, and industry and policymakers need to work together to ensure that people understand the point at which the conventions they might have relied on in the past are no longer relevant. But with these complexities, and with the directive's exhaustion that the Commission must report on media literacy levels, and with the economic compulsion that is driving governments, comes an opportunity for regulators and governments. And indeed, here in Spain, there is an excellent opportunity at this precise moment. In this last month, the government unveiled, finally, the Audiovisual General Law, which will establish a legal framework for the audiovisual sector. It is to be hoped by many that it will be through Parliament by the middle of next year. And it is seen by government and many in industry as a real opportunity to help the industry through this current economic crisis and to provide a clear framework for developments in the future. With the creation of a Council for Audiovisual Media by the proposed law, there is an opportunity to ensure that the requirements that will be placed on Member States regarding media literacy policies can be reflected in the work of the Council. Again, these need not be prescriptive, but should move the industry and policymakers together to ensure the health of the market and the society which it serves. Some of this is already happening in the autonomous regions of Spain, of course. In Catalonia, Navarra, Andalusia, they all promote awareness of media literacy and undertake research, as well as giving themselves a coordinating or facilitating role. In addition, Catalonia supports particular initiatives such as awards in schools, given to teachers and pupils or students. It offers grants to media literacy projects and works in partnership, as do the other autonomous regions, across the range of stakeholders. Interestingly, a point of difference for those who aren't from Spain, the Catalonian Audiovisual Council talks both of media literacy and of education and communication, which allows it to work with schools and in both formal and informal learning sectors. In fact, there seems to be a template of actions that a variety of regulators in the communications field can take either on a voluntary basis or because they're statutorily required to, as in the UK and Germany. And the most recent of these is the law that underpins the very recently formed Broadcasting Authority of Ireland, which has a remit to promote media literacy. So could this be something written into the work of the forthcoming Council for Audiovisual Media here in Spain? The Broadcasting Authority of Ireland asked some academics to review what they, as a regulator, should do to encourage and promote media literacy. And the possible list of initiatives recommended included research. So the proposed Broadcasting Authority of Ireland already has a research function, and the authors suggest that media literacy should act as an overarching framework for gathering information on the emerging communications landscape. By this, they mean the use to which these media forms are put, and the understanding of what they are offering should be understood alongside statistics on use per se. Industry support, and people have talked about this a little bit today, but the effectiveness of initiatives supported by the industry should not be underestimated. As I've said, in the autonomous regions, or some of the autonomous regions in Spain, there are such initiatives with industry. The BBC in the UK has media literacy as part of its own charter agreement, and perhaps this can be put into the plans for public service broadcasters in Spain. But the authors of the Irish report noted that many of these initiatives were one-off and were not systematic, so they suggest looking at more overt models and means of working together, such as those used in Canada, where there are tax or transmission time-based advantages to initiatives that are considered to be of social benefit. And then finally, they talk about information exchange and the sharing of expertise. And they point to the Media Literacy Task Force in the UK, which was driven by industry and NGO interests, including those involved in education and skills training. And this has allowed the task force to explain the relevance of media literacy within the industry and to its sometimes, often indeed, sceptical membership. So, to conclude, there is increasingly an understanding amongst policymakers that users of digital technologies and content are increasing in power and sophistication, and their ability to make demands of governments and policymakers is growing commensurately. Policymakers also recognise that media literacy and the ability to use and manipulate the digital media are going to be increasingly important for the economic success of a region. And the complexities are many. There is not just needing to understand what one is receiving and evaluating it. The technology itself is being deconstructed into hardware, the delivery platform, if you like, and the software, which allows the user to manipulate the content and to find new uses and ways in which to share and develop and create. This is a different world, and media literacy can offer a junction between these areas. Analog television and broadcasting by its nature is not interactive, whereas the new media technologies allow great interactivity. Those who are consumers, the audience, now can create content and control how and when it is received or used. This is quite a different scenario from that offered by analog broadcasting, and the conventions that surround this new interactivity, the rules by which people should and do interact, are developing all the while. People today talked of it as nethics or net ethics. People have little time, the conventions have little time to bed down and be established before the technology allows a new form of use to add to or overtake the last usage, and the learning process is truncated. I've already referred to the recommendation regarding an inclusive society, and there are many strategies that now seek to close what has been called the digital divide, where groups within society are disadvantaged by their lack of access to digital communications technologies. And alongside this is the drive I've already mentioned to provide everyone with broadband internet access. In the United Kingdom, media literacy forms part of this move towards digital inclusion. So I have suggested that the new Council for Audiovisual Media could incorporate some of these suggestions into its work. Of course, any regulatory model will have to develop responses appropriate to the technologies. The need is there to have clear common principles, hopefully arrived at consensually with other stakeholders, and the need to accept increased autonomy of the user by empowering him or her to take advantage of the significant opportunities offered by the coming media communications environment. But I would argue media literacy remains a key overarching principle or objective. It seems to me you have a tremendous opportunity here in Spain, and I hope it can be grasped. Thank you very much.